Everybody, welcome back. Hour number 3. It is the Fetch Inside the Eye Live, intelligent media for the politically aware. Again, it is March the 15th, 2025. And again, hour number 3. Our next guest here is quite an interesting character. I actually had the opportunity to meet him here in Riyadh. He's an academic and ethno-musicologist. He's an author, a producer, composer, researcher, and a musician. And quite an impressive array of musical talent here. He's mastered North Indian classical music and orchestral performance, honed over many, many, many years. And of course, he teaches. I think he's has something like many different universities. He can fill us in if it's that important, I guess. But he even he's a guest professor, I guess, throughout many, many schools in India because he's mastered, I guess, some of the musical instruments. I don't know if it's sitar or what, dude. You'll tell us. But I don't know. We call you just H, or I don't know what.
Just you know what,
dude.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Just go ahead and call me Hans Utter. That's my name. I figure.
There you go. You're finally not afraid. All right. Good for you. The rest of us aren't either anymore. But Hans is good enough. Well, first of all, welcome. Long time no see, man. We had a great time when you were here. Now, if you guys don't know Hans is he's a charismatic guy. I'm going to give you that, Hans. You're very charismatic. He was at Saudi Arabia's Comic-Con. There was a Comic-Con exhibition here in Riyadh, and I was trying to help secure some local talent to fill in for Comic-Con, of which he was directly representing. And we could never get the local talent secured. They didn't want to pay the fee, I think. And Hans ended up just stealing the show. I mean, he was the guitarist. He was the live entertainment. He ended up becoming like a semi-rock star here within the venue. People loved his, like I say, he's charismatic. They loved his playing and all that fun stuff. And so Hans, just kind of share some of your experiences here working Comic-Con. What was it like for you to come into Saudi and become a semi-rock star for the Saudis?
Well, what's really interesting, Dennis, is the whole thing was, it was not planned. I was contracted to be the guy in between the main acts, right? So kind of like the gong show guy, play a couple songs, in between the various performances. And it turned out you have this shadowy organization. Maybe not so shadowy, Poets International Collective, no idea who these people are. They were kind of wandering around, not doing much. And basically, I got to say thanks to you. And I ended up having to, I was just thrown in. We don't have any other musicians. So here you are. And the Saudi delegation is about to walk in, and the Japanese in the same convention center were completely, dialed in, beautiful stage, many international acts. And they were still putting the carpet down right before the delegation came in to see what they spent their money on. And so I ended up, it was contingency. I really didn't know what to do. And I think it's kind of a funny anecdote as a sound guy was trying to get me to play this theme, this particular Arabic music. And I'm trying to learn it off of his phone, learn it by ear. And then he's like, when I'm about to play, he's like, well, I don't think you should play that because you're making a few mistakes and it's composed by the Prince. So best not to play it. We'll just put it that way. So I started out with Born Under a Bad Sign. I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm just going to play. And it ended up being, I had such an amazing response. In fact, a lot of the Hollywood celebrities were coming up to me and wanted to meet me, and including Steven Seagal, who I got his personal contact. I have not. I probably should reach out to him, but it turns out he used to play blues guitar back in the day in New York City and stuff like that. So it was kind of a shift from the anonymous background worker to the center stage. And I have to say, Dennis, without you dialing in that sound system, it would never would have happened. And you had just a wonderful, just awesome, excellent tech. And it was really cool that, obviously I have did a lot of podcast stuff, primarily with like Gnostic Media, and I'd done things here and there. But, of course, I've been aware of your work for many, many years, long before I ever crossed the line from public to private, so to speak.
You know what I remember about that is, we had just you on the stage, right? That was it. And then you go down to the far end of the hall. They had this beautiful stage, the whole band set up, wonderful setup. Everything's ready to go. You know, and here I am. I'm trying to get your local talent to help you. They just didn't want to pay. We brought in some what we thought were some pretty good acts, but they didn't want to pay. They just didn't want to pay. It wasn't that much money. They just didn't want to pay, and you know they had the money, and so you got stuck, man. You literally had to you're like stuck. You're doing like solo guitar work. You didn't have anybody to help you.
They wouldn't even hire. I mean, it was unbelievable. Like we went and I told them, I said, I require an amplifier. I require this gear. I get there. And if you know anything about guitar, I have an electric guitar and I have a DI box. You can't play electric guitar plugging into a DI box. So with the sound guy you brought, we're driving about 100 miles an hour, to go to this mall before it closes to buy some kind of guitar.
Right. Huh? I forgot about that. I forgot about that. That's right. And I was actually having to take you out to help you get some gear. We went to that store called Dahlia in the mall.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly.
And it was one of those things is I was prepared just to do some filler music, and suddenly we don't have anybody. And again, as you mentioned, the contrast, the Japanese thing was so dialed in, and it's like, I'm like, what are these guys doing? And then the Poets International, what was interesting is they were offering like we'll send you an IOU from some bank account in London. Like no one's going to do that. You know what I mean? Like what does, so you know what? But it was just one of those things where, okay, I'm here. I got to do something. I'm not even prepared, but I'm just going to play. And it ended up, I just played stuff I knew and just, learned some songs. And actually, I normally don't even sing. And so it was just me. And
the funny thing is I talked to people afterwards. You were a really big hit. I mean, people loved you. You were like a superstar because I knew you. I was getting favors. It's like, what's this? What's this? Because I know the guitars, I'm getting these favors. What's this? But it was a hell of a lot of fun. Nice to meet you. How was your experience with the Saudi people and this environment? And it's better now, by the way.
I have to say that I had just and the stress or difficulties that I experienced were completely due to the, the organization that I was working with, so that anything, I'll just bracket that. But I loved it. I thought it was a really great place. The people were really warm, open, friendly. It was the complete opposite of the impression you have of Saudi. So I had a really fantastic time, and I don't have a single criticism of my experience there. It was just you see the difference between the media impression and what many people think, and when you go there, you're like, wow, this is a great place, and these are really wonderful people.
And you overlooked the drinking in the hotel.
They had the crazy parties. They, some of the celebrities, and one of the guys was showing pictures. They had I think it was like it was the largest bottle of Johnny Walker I've ever seen. Like those huge ones, and I have no idea how much that must have cost, because I know so there is some. Obviously black market. I did not drink at all when I was there, and I just thought I don't need to, I don't want to be around a bunch of celebrities doing whatever they're doing. Not that wouldn't have been fun per se, but I stayed clean and pure. So
I still do. I still do. So it's okay. I get it, So anyways, great to talk to you again. I think we originally were introduced to an old friend of ours. I'm not sure if he's even alive anymore. Hans also, I think his name. Okay. I think his name was Hans. It's been so many years in the white nationalist movement back in the day, and I think he recommended that I get in touch with you for the show equally. So times have changed a lot. The Overton window has shifted a lot since you were last back on the show. That's for sure. And so how do you see, I guess, state of nationalism, et cetera, in the United States and across some of the places you've been kind of observing?
Well, it's quite interesting, this whole progression and this whole shift. And, you were just speaking, I was listening to the previous segment. And so Romania, of course, I don't know if you're familiar with Cornelius Candello for My Legionnaires, who had a very intense nationalist movement during World War II. And so this was He had the Legion of Archangel St. Michael, extremely hardcore guy, but extremely heroic person. So I don't know if just recommend people kind of look into him, his model of these kind of cells, right? So it was a cell structure, revolutionary cell structure, and he didn't mince words. I mean, he was a really intense person. He sort of looked like a movie star, very handsome guy. Unfortunately, ended up in jail. But so he created a structure of these sort of nationalist types of movement that was sort of an aggregate sector of these types of cells. And so the United States, of course, especially if you threw the word white in there, especially if you're in an academic or entertainment industry, you might as well just, jump on the Titanic, because your career is going down the drain pretty quickly. You like Kevin McDonald. But there's a big shift in that. I think people aren't afraid to talk about things. You can see even the Colonel Douglas McGregor is openly talking about things like immigration. And, as I was in India actually during the election, and it was amazing how much people love Trump in India. They just love Trump. And even Indian people would say, he's like, you're Native American, meaning you're from America. Why is your country destroying itself? Why is your country fostering this massive, multi-million army of I hate to use the word degenerate, but certain people, of course, are very degenerate. But why is your country committing suicide? Why is the white race killing itself? But we love Trump, and we believe in our nation, and you should believe in your nation. And so that was quite interesting to see that that they, like I said, in India, Trump is like they love Trump. And I was even at a hotel in a sort of a restricted border area, and the security guard is like, he was looking at me, do you like Trump? And it was almost like he wasn't going to let me in the hotel if I said, no, I don't like Trump. But he's like, you like Trump? He's like, yes, my American brother. So that was pretty surprising. I'm in a pretty liberal sector of Ohio. So, even saying you're a Trump voter would get you, you'd be ostracized. It was pretty, so that's a big shift. And, these various movements in Europe are really important because, at a certain point, this system, this systematic dispossession, the intellectual, fabric of DEI, or should be called DIE, et cetera, is shown to be, by your works, you shall know them. It's shown to be absolutely destructive, putting people with no qualifications, airplane crashes, on and on and on, totally discrediting the American academic service system, especially the Ivy League. So I think this shift is necessary, and I don't know how much further it could have gone, right? So just to summarize, depending on where you're at, there's a very big, you could say the word vibe, right? So at least small town Ohio in the more rural areas outside the major sort of liberal bastions of Columbus, for example, people there's a really a sense of positive expectancy going on. In DC, that is not the case. People are absolutely going insane. They're totally traumatized. An acquaintance of mine is a psychiatrist that works with a lot of very high-level government people. He's right across from the White House, and people are just having complete mental meltdowns, absolutely going insane. So you see this dichotomy, and we're really at a crossroads, and I don't know what is going to unfold. I can only hope that this continues. However, of course, there's the pushback from this very rapid fire sort of assault that Trump has, initiated right when he walked in the door. I don't think anybody was expecting that. But so, it's hard to say what's going to happen. But what is happening is a lot of radical changes. And it seems like, at least from my angle, that at least it's much better than it was. And it appears to be improving. I don't know what's your take on that.
Yeah, for me, it's been improving equally. I mean, it's obviously when you have the Candace Owens, even Tucker Carlson is mirroring stuff we've been saying for over a decade. You know, you're like, okay, and then McGregor is out there. People like a Ritter. I'm not a big fan of Ritter per se, but he, was such a big Israeli-centric guy back in the day, and he's like anti-Israel now to a T. So obviously everything has changed. And it's all for the positive. It needs to keep going. There is the pushback. Obviously, they're going to keep arresting anti-Semites or whatever to try to put it back underneath the lid. But if they go so far in America, then we're going to say you're just no different than the UK, which they know is in a bad situation. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Now, let's just kind of go back to the fun stuff. What is the instruments you've actually mastered? Because I don't know.
Okay. Well, by the way, let me just mention this just at the outset. So I do have a new radio show broadcasting that I've started. It's called Hans Utter Investigates,
really?
Eyes Wide Open. There is another iteration of that appears to be on other people's channels that are, I had an old radio show and other people got the content, but this is new content. So check it out on Spreaker. I'm on Odyssey, BitChute, and Rumble. So Hans Utter Investigates. So I think I've done about 20, 30 shows ish at this point.
Damn, I didn't know that. So it's actually a good time for you to be on, man. You can promote that puppy.
Yeah, I just kind of started it as one of those things where I thought, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. If I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. So I just, just got some material together and just started knocking it out. And, because I guess also it is a bit of a different tenor. And I just, maybe this is very inappropriate, but I remember back in the day, there was some comment on the Mammy Shit website, and someone called Hans Utter the Jew-loving Jew, and I remember seeing that and just kind of laughing about that. It's like, oh, that's funny, but I'm not going to necessarily go to that topic, but it's interesting to see that at a certain point, if you're going to speak up and feel you can have a positive impact, I think it's important. If not, then don't do it. But how long is life, right? You got to, if something is important, then make your best attempt.
Only so much of us, Hans, have the gift to actually speak and influence. So if we're always going to be silent, it's taking a voice off the playing field, and that's not going to serve anybody's interest on a positive way, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
At least from our side.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, just back to instruments I play. So guitar, I play guitar. I think I had like 15 different concerts in February. So I did like straight ahead jazz. I play a lot of R&B, funk music with, musicians that are pretty well known. So that's primarily, you could say, the black music circuit. I do that. I play oud, Arabic music, sitar, the 22 string behemoth, definitely one of the most difficult string instruments there is. And no matter how long you played, it's a bit challenging. But sitar, of course, Beatles, Ravi Shankar. And I also play tabla. I got to play, that's an Indian drum, like Zakir Hussain, if people know him. And I got to play that with the symphony orchestra, that was quite a challenging gig for me, but I did it, pulled it off. So basically guitar, sitar, tabla, oud, and, and I can play, bass and keyboard to a certain extent, but those are my main performance vectors.
What's it like to master like the Indian instrument, which it looks difficult, and actually be like a speaker across so many universities in India? What's that like?
It's nice. I mean, I went through sort of an interesting journey or progression, because when I was younger, I actually left the United States, dropped out of college my senior year, got disowned by my family, and just lived in India to learn music, which I would not do that now. It was pretty hardcore. But I did that. And then, came back to the States, and I had a corporate job for a bit. And then I got back into playing a lot of, gigs, mostly at bars. And I thought, I got to get out of this world. So I decided somehow I got into grad school, and I finished my college degree correspondence, got into grad school, went all the way up to PhD. And then because of the change of the times in the United States, my academic stuff, it's basically, I just said, forget it for now, because A, it's slave wages. B, there was so much pressure of, student approval. If you just look at someone cross-eyed, they call you a racist. And I mean, not to go into things that maybe are better left unsaid, but I mean, there were people that were actively working against me, and I wasn't even aware of it because I don't work that way, but maybe I represented a threat, whatever. But so that being said, when in India, you see, I really, really excellent, great people, extremely appreciative, very open-minded, overall much higher level of respect for the academic stuff, and actually a lot, I'd say overall, no offense to, most American college-age students, but a much higher, just a greater chop, so to speak, greater, discipline, motivation, and basic education. That's not people's fault in the United States per se. It's the education system. But so you can see on one level why, Indians, at least, of course, on the books, and it's not the case, but they're the richest demographic. Why? Because they work hard. They have strong ethnic national identity. They have strong family culture, and they have a strong sense of discipline and respect, as opposed to just this idea of I'm entitled to get a degree or, things like that.
You raise a really good point. Our generation, Hans, we're a bit older. We had the discipline, and it's like that seems to have somehow gone by the wayside with this neo-Bolshevik education system in America, where other cultures like China and, they just have a very strong ethnic, it's not ethnic, but they have a very strong dedication to education. And that's really what America's missing. We don't have that discipline. At least it doesn't, I don't know, I'm not there, but I see the college kids coming over to here, and it's like, man, this guy's clueless, or this woman's clueless, like what the hell's going on over there?
Yeah, I mean, there's, one of the things, and just speak in general, I'm not going to give specific examples since I'm using my real name, so I will. But in general, there's a cultural imprint, that some of the real disciplines of learning how to think, logic, reason, even mathematics, whatever extent, but this idea of being able to face and overcome challenges and having respect for the cultural achievements of Western civilization, which really, this is what they have in China, what they have in India. This is why you see so many of these Chinese people are playing great Western classical music, right? They have that discipline and respect. And so there's a couple different aspects. One of them, at least, especially for the white male, this is kind of a long progression, but you can go back to Dr. Spock, the original Dr. Spock, who promulgated this idea of child rearing, where the kid just does whatever they want. They can freak out, they can spit, yell, to their parents. Then you take that to the me generation, the 70s, 80s. You have this very sort of complacent. The man becomes like this sort of either sort of a type A uber asshole or just a completely complacent doormat. And so, and part of that has to do with this identity of not respecting your own cultural, ethnic, racial heritage. And this starts really in the family. And we can go back from Blackboard Jungle all the way to, Sid Vicious, all the stuff in the 1960s, where, you break away from the family. And also you're not satisfied. You have to, you're not satisfied with, say, I'm in a small town, I'm going to work in this particular business. You want to, people don't generally respect the fabric of the tradition and history. So that's one facet. And the second facet is that this,
second facet can wait for the break. Wait for the break here, Hans. We're going into a break. All right. Awesome, dude. We'll be right back right after this, everybody. It's The Fetch Inside the Eye Live. All right. Welcome back, everybody. It's The Fetch Inside the Eye Live. Joining us again, coming from the States, Mr. Hans Utter. Among his many credits here, he's associated with organizations like the Society for Ethno-Musicology, Association of Asian Studies, and the Advancing Interdisciplinary Research on Singing airs. I didn't know that. And what else? Course, consortium with the Ohio Arts Council. So very good. So Hans, thanks for joining us again. It's great to have you back.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, Dennis. It's always always fun to do some broadcasting here and there.
Well, you're back in it, man.
Yeah.
Go ahead and promote your show again. Yeah, okay, promote your show again.
Hans Utter Investigates Eyes Wide Open. It is on Spreaker. Just make sure you find the new one. I know Ed Opperman has a version of this that he's generating revenue off of, but that's good for Ed. Whatever. He had the alacrity to do that. And I'm on Odyssey, BitChute, and Rumble. Same name. Just type it in. It will come up. And that's it. So it's been actually.
I'll tell you what. So. What's it all about? I mean, what's the editorial framing for this? People want to check it out. What are they going to expect when they arrive?
Well. It's a bit of a lot of different types of material. I did a few things on like film analysis. I did something recently on Catcher in the Rye with William Ramsey. I've got this astrology guy who came on last time, which I'm going to post. I've done. So it's kind of you could say it's a bit on a conspiracy tip, so to speak, but with some types of analysis and trying to go into, cultural production and how that influences society and some of the other sort of psychological aspects, historical research, et cetera. So it's pretty, I think I'm pretty open to a lot of different topics, and I'm going to try to get some new guests. But yeah, so it's, if you like Inside the Eye Live, I think you'll like my show, hopefully.
Yeah, probably. How many hours is it, and when's it on? Is it live or is it like pre-recorded and you post?
At this point, it's pre-recorded and I post. I do some live things. I'm going to be posting a new show this today, but I ran into some issues. I was using a StreamYard, and they basically strong-armed me and they shut down my recording because they were trying to get me to pay for the pro plan, which is $40 a week, which is pretty high.
Expensive.
Right? Yeah, so
that's actually high. That is high.
Yeah, so I've got some open source protocol stuff that I'm trying to work with and find a way to get this live. I think I've done I did a couple live things on Twitter, and I've just avoided YouTube because I've always had issues with them. But basically, yeah, hopefully I'm going to get to a live slot, and probably Sunday nights at 8 p.m. And that would probably be live on Spreaker, and then the video stuff will be uploaded later to the other channels.
Now, obviously, you do a lot of gigs. How many gigs a year do you do?
Gosh, it depends. At least 100-ish. Yeah, around 100, maybe more than that.
Wow. How have things changed since the pandemic?
Well, I had basically everything disappeared for music, for live performance. And so I used that time to actually build a pretty advanced recording studio in my house and learn construction, all that stuff. But it really severed a lot of the social stream, so to speak. And a lot of people didn't make it out of that. Even say where I'm at in Columbus, Ohio, considered to be the fastest growing city in the United States. There's almost every single music store is out of business. And now there's like one left, and it's pretty abysmal. No offense to the people that work there. I won't mention the name, but so it has changed in that I think people are getting into going, out more, but there's a kind of a social fabric thing that appears to, at least in my relationship to it, appears to be kind of cut. And so I think the trauma still lingers. I think from the COVID fiasco, genocide program, and so it has changed. But I think things, I think there's a resilience to the human spirit and to the different races or ethnic groups. And so I think that as long as it doesn't go too far to degeneration, I think there's always that the rebirth is possible, and we may be moving into that, which I'm pretty excited to see.
How would you equate like this? Oh, I'm 70s boomers guy. And of course, the music of the 70s was exceedingly creative and varied in its techniques and styles. And how would you equate that to modern music nowadays? With the way, obviously, let me just throw this out then. My take, and I don't know because I'm not in the scene, but my take is that the way modern music is produced nowadays, we don't have true artists anymore. What's your opinion of that?
There was in the 70s is a great example. Just a lot of really, really interesting creative output that was going. And even, in the 1960s, you see that. So, some of these things have been long types of progressions. One of them being sort of the corporatization of the music industry, and also the fact that the risk-taking protocols, right? They would just sign people randomly. We don't know who this band is. We're going to go ahead and sign them, let it do a few albums. That, that's changed to a great extent. The music industry in terms of physical product, like with LPs, yes, the hipsters are buying LPs and stuff, but I mean, CDs are even, not there so much. So the MP3, Spotify, streaming, there's almost no revenue in that. I mean, you just make pennies, on the dollar for that type of thing. So that's impacted things. What you see, and this is a major transformation that I witnessed in my lifetime, is where when I was a kid, I used to listen to this show called Psychedelic Sunday, and they would play 60s music. You wouldn't hear that music on the normal radio, right? It would just be, you could find it, but it wasn't and now we got locked into this sort of classic rock. So you just have sort of a replication of particular templates, and people just, it's like, you look at Hollywood, let's do another, just do it, copy this movie and do another version of it and make it suck pretty bad, And so that's influenced a lot. And I think we're really inundated, at least in the United States. I'm sure not in Riyadh, but in the U.S., you go to the gas station, they're playing background music, grocery store, everywhere you are, you're hearing constant. A lot of times it's the same classic rock or maybe some 90s stuff, but you're just hearing the same stuff over and over again. A lot of this 80s music, some of it which was not particularly good. And so you're kind of inundated in the past. And honestly, a lot of the best way to make money now, as at least as sort of a popular musician, is cover bands, right? So there's cover bands and tribute bands all over the place, and they're just playing the same cover songs. And so the scope
doesn't this allude to... Yeah, but doesn't this then allude to what I'm saying? Is that the current talent just isn't there? They're not producing anymore creative music anymore. And what I hear on the radio, there's like one semi-rock station. It's a NBC something or other, right? And it's like it's the only English thing here, and it's like, this stuff sucks. Well, I just don't see the creative talent. And maybe I'm old-fashioned and I appreciated what we had, but I just don't hear it. I don't hear it. That's where I'm coming from.
Well, so there's an aspect. Number one is that, and this can go back to, I mentioned that second point I was talking about, what's going on with the education system, and I'll kind of tie this together. But there's a sense of lack of discipline, just wanting everything now without any effort. This whole thing of being overly self-identified. Oh, I'm so traumatized. I can't do this. This hurts my feelings. So that also impacts the creative process, because I think that if you're so focused just on yourself in a very sort of, like Alanis Morissette is a great example of just me, right? So to be creative, I think you have to expand out of those boundaries of just not just staring in the mirror in your small little ego world. And then, the fact is there's challenges, people not willing to take challenges, find the easy way. And then also just the replication. So if you want to make money, you may be a very, very creative person, but if you want to make money, you got to play these cover songs, and like Bryan Adams, my gosh, I don't want to play Bryan Adams. I refuse. If a band plays Bryan Adams, I'm out. Billy Joel, that guy drives me up the wall. No offense to Billy Joel. But what I'm saying is that people, so there is some scope, but you have this more indie music stuff, but really, just in a meta way, I think that the people with creative output are not being heard. They're maybe you'll find them in certain clubs in New York or here or there. There's not enough money in that. There's a whole thing of pay to play where New York City, Los Angeles and stuff, you have to pay the club to perform. But, they charge you $2,000 for the sound guy. So, and the other thing is that this sort of mechanization, and then people also not really wanting, not really having the courage or the desire or the will to really express themselves. And if you're just trying to copy so-and-so, I want to, copy whoever whatever, whether it's rap or whether it's, I don't know, Van Halen, that's kind of old, but so that's why you kind of have the stagnation and you just have retreads, right? And then the problem is that then people hear someone retreading, say they're doing like a version of Led Zeppelin, and the producers, they can just copy all this stuff and engineer it and basically just replicate. I mean, of course, not Led Zeppelin is probably a bad example, just replicate it, and then people just follow this cookie cutter mold. And so the boundaries become so enclosed that they don't even think outside of that. And then the other thing is, I think a lot of people are just motivated by desire for fame. I want to be famous. I want everyone to know me. I want to be wealthy. I want to, have my bling, this or that. So that, the real creativity comes from some kind of inner drive, and being able to challenge yourself and challenge other people, take risks, be able to face difficulties and overcome them. So, you know what I mean? If you're just there and you want to make money and become famous, that's just a vehicle. So what does the music even matter? So people like that will very easily fall into the cookie cutter mode because they have nothing to say fundamentally, right? So if that makes sense, the way I'm outlining that.
Are you do you follow anything in the acapella market?
A little bit, yeah. I've checked out some great stuff, yeah.
Yeah, give me like Home Free? Do you know Home Free?
Yes, and then Kentucky.
I like their work. I really like their work. You know what I mean? As an a cappella band, I think they're I wouldn't mind bringing them here, as an act to kind of demonstrate that as part of your, this other project we're talking about, with that country style, type of. I like their sound. They're just somebody I like. Yeah. So I just kind of throw that out there.
Yeah, I think you can find this traditional American music movement is coming up, and you find some really very good artists in both the acoustic, folk, and even some newer like bluegrass type artists, and then also the acapella. And I've heard some really amazing groups that are really good, and people that can actually sing, right? They don't need the whatever the auto tune effect. So that's there, and you know what? Things come and go. Maybe, rock in a certain way. And I would, rap is still going. I can't believe it's like normally these genres don't last that long. It's been going since the 80s, in terms of mainstream and still retreading. So I think, that there's more independent avenues. I think people are returning in this other side are returning to a more traditional type of output because these other forms are kind of just so much locked in, and maybe they've lost their resonance with the culture.
You see music, in the 70s, we had that rebellious strain to us. We had like the occult insights, but we had this rebellious strain. Do you see music, or let's say the art forms, coming back to being a vehicle for subtle to, if not less than subtle, political influence, trying to aid in social movements? Do you see that happening, or is it just too corporate to try to even think this way?
It can absolutely be done. And the thing is that music, people really, some people are aware, but it can have a tremendous impact on the culture and society. And this is something you go back to ancient China, go back to Plato's Republic, talking about the impact of certain types of music, especially on adolescence and youth, how will just basically, deform their emotional types of resonance, right? Deform their ability to become a fully operational human being. So I think this music it's always been seen as a really revolutionary force, or at least an encapsulation of the cutting edge of the time. And so absolutely this potential exists. I don't think it's going to go through it's going to come from the bottom up, not the top down, but that potentiality is there. But on the other hand, it does require sincerity, and the idea to face challenges and take risks. But for sure, I think music absolutely has that potential and always has had that potential.
Just kind of shift gears a little bit, go into the politics in America. What's your opinion of Doge? I always thought it was a coin until I realized it was a government agency. I thought Doge was a coin, a crypto coin. That's how out of touch I was. Well, what the hell is this Doge coin? How much is this Doge coin worth? Apparently trillions.
Yeah. I mean, so, there's a lot, there's a lot of good that's happening. There's things that maybe, I mean, one of it, it's in my estimation, it's always more effective ultimately if you look at, say, the communist model of just create chaos and just destroy the institutional infrastructure, and then things will magically, the workers' revolution will bring everything back together. It's much more efficient to clean out existing structures, right? You don't want to destroy structures, but you want to clean them. And I think so. I think the radical approach is warranted. The question is this sustainable? And one issue I have, though, for example, with the tariffs is I think that, before you implement tariffs, you need to get some manufacturing infrastructure back in the United States and really
I was thinking the same thing. It's almost like, you're gonna force that rapid manufacturing buildup because you're going to make things so expensive. Of course, when you do that, that creates opportunity to start making things. So maybe he's saying we can't compete now, so let's just tariff everything so we can create the space to compete while we try to cut the costs and bring expenses down. What I think's happened.
Yeah, so I think there's, again, it's surprising how much has happened. Epstein files are not really released yet. And so,
but they're arresting those anti-Semites though. People are like kind of sorry. People are actually asking that now. Why is it the anti-Semites that get arrested, but nothing from Epstein? And everybody knows Epstein was Mossad. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and so this is the one. I mean, I'd say that one of the major issues obviously is Trump. You could look at it as kind of a game theory. He's just being so extreme. Like, did you see the Trump Gaza video? That's pretty. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah, but is he just going so extreme that he's, using, they say, 5DTS game theory to promote the actual, say like the Middle East and China, maybe not say China, but, Iran, Russia, really creating a unified front because it's so extreme and so over the top? Or is he just, this thing with, of course, even the definition of anti-Semite means like if you don't like genocide, you're an anti-Semite, basically. I mean, that's in exactly. A certain way.
If you're human, you're an anti-Semite sometimes. Just if you have human emotion, you're anti-Semitic in some cases. So it's a very strange environment they're trying to create with this thing. To me, it's okay. I don't mind it because all it's going to do is wake more people up. It's like, okay, go ahead, guys, speed this up. We've been warning for 15 years. You didn't want to listen. Okay, go ahead and do it. I don't want to be wrapped in it, but go ahead. It'll wake people up.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Candace Owens. I mean, she look, say for example, people that were kind of fringe figures. E. Michael Jones, has become quite prominent now. Obviously he's a pretty rigid Catholic perspective, but like Candace Owens, she stepped right. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out that people could not even imagine being, disseminating to this level. And the thing is that, of course, ironically enough, the actual Semites are the ones who are being killed. So that's of course an irony, but. The other thing is
yeah.
But as you've been around this, longer than I have. I mean, it was like, if you talk about certain topics, you're like, you can feel it. Like, wow, I'm taking a risk here by going into this. And you know what I mean. It was really quite underground, actually, right? I mean, it was in a certain way, it was like the forbidden secret. I mean, at least in terms of mainstream stuff. So. I don't know. The thing is that, again, you have that the overshowing the hand, right? You have this sense of total arrogance, complete control, and then the contradictions just become so glaring that how can you ignore it? You can't ignore it anymore. It's in your face. It doesn't matter whatever you believe or not, but fortunately or unfortunately, they've really forced the hand of like, here is one side, lies, mendacity, horrific genocide. The other side, let's try to find a world that's not so poisonous. Let's try to make a world that's good for everybody, and let's respect human life, and let's respect human dignity. So I think it may be backfiring. It's got, maybe the other side, you could say, well, from this perspective, we have so much power. We'll do whatever we want. We don't care if right? Just like what happened in your last guest. They just said, oh, the election, null and void. You know what I mean? Like, we don't care. We're just going to do it because we don't mind. I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Same as pretty much yours. I think really the people, people don't want the violence anymore. So you're not going to go back to a 1930s, 40s scenario. People just don't want it. They don't. So we have to continue to work through this, the reason and the voice and try to convince people to move. I think Trump did a great job. I know he's a big pro-Zionist guy, but he's done a great job to elevate even a lot of the fringe topics to the mainstream and create a movement that I think if we can not identify with, but tap into it and take that energy and continue to build on it, just as Trump built on what we had built on. Trump didn't come out of a vacuum. I mean, he came out of all that hard work of the 2000s, early 2010s that allowed his message, because we'd already built a good base. You can't underestimate our influence in that time, if you know what I mean. And so I think we just have to keep working at it, keep focused. And, someone's going to come along. We see Tucker coming. You see a Candace, but there's going to be so many more people after us, and got to do it in a way that's as nonviolent as you can. But again, I'm like Trump says, he says, I'm not really for the death penalty, but I'm for the death penalty. And where you have egregious issues, you're just going to have to understand it is a war for the human spirit. And does humanity want to win? And if they don't, then obviously it's going to be more of the same. But I don't think we can go back, dude. I don't think that humanity is going to go back. I think they're too awake now.
Yeah, I mean, it can go back if there's, this oppressive global total control state, is implemented. But then that,
like COVID, then that was a difficult. They managed to lock the whole freaking world down. It was very impressive.
Yeah,
but the whole thing was freaking locked.
And so many people, I mean, there was a tremendous destruction. I mean, people are still suffering from mental health issues, that's part of it. But the thing is that this is also called, if you look at it in terms of game theory or fifth generation warfare, that the information, which can be described as conceptual power, is the lowest form of power is brute military force, right? So you can go up all the stages of potential power. So the conceptual power, the really creating this type of understanding, I think is a way to shift the system without, because, it's very easy to destroy something. It's very hard to build something. Right. So it's best not to destroy the structures, but to sort of infiltrate them or just clean them. And I think this is potentially quite positive. I don't think they can go back. They can, because this, like the COVID, this is a major, you just put all your money on the table.
All right, Hans, leave it at that, man. Great closure there, everybody. Thanks for listening Inside the Eye Live. See you next week. Good night, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Dennis, for having me on.
Yeah, good job, man. Thanks. Talk soon.